Hello and welcome to our College First Communicators webinar, where we will dive into strategies of compiling a compelling academic All-American nomination. Whether you're new to the process or looking to sharpen your approach, there's something that everyone can take away from today's session. My name is Kobe Wassler, and I'm the Director of Digital Strategy at the U.S. Air Force Academy. The webinar is presented as a collaboration between the Academic All-America Core Program Committee and the Professional Development and Education Committee. I'm excited to serve as today's moderator. Thank you to those who submitted questions during registration. If you're watching live, you can submit additional questions using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We've got a lot to cover today, so I'll turn it over to our amazing group of panelists to introduce themselves and share a bit about their journey in athletic communications. Isaac, we'll go ahead and start with you.
Hey, good morning or good afternoon, everybody. My name is Isaac Camelli. I'm the Sports Information Director at Cal State Bakersfield. I'm in my 13th year here, but I got my start with the university as a table crew worker and just gradually worked my way up, and now I oversee all of our communications. And I'm really blessed to be here and doing what I love to do in my own hometown, which is a pretty cool opportunity.
Awesome. And Emily, we'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Kobe. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone. My name is Emily Dorco. I currently serve as the Associate Athletic Director for External Relations and the Senior Woman Administrator at Adelphi University, Division II on Long Island. Unique story as well. I grew up at Adelphi. I was a two-sport athlete. I am a member of the Hall of Fame. I started working in sports info as a sophomore and grew to love it and almost never left. I got my first job out of college after grad school at New York Tech, but quickly returned in 2017 and have been in my full-time role at my alma mater, so I can't ask for anything more.
Awesome. And our last panelist, Kevin.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks, Kobe. My name's Kevin Smith. I'm the Assistant AD of Communications at the College of Worcester in Ohio, in my 11th year overall here at the college. For that, I was an undergrad student worker at the University of Louisville and a grad assistant at John Carroll. Kind of had some connections along the way. Coaches from my hometown knew Rocco Gasparo at Louisville. He was a student worker for Chris Wensler at John Carroll, and Hugh Howard, who hired me at Worcester, was friends with Chris Wensler, obviously, because we're close by, and his wife previously worked at John Carroll.
Awesome. Well, thank you all again for being on our panel today, and we're looking forward to hearing everything you all have to say. So diving right in, kind of starting with the time management and planning aspect of creating these nominations, just going around the horn here. What's your go-to strategy for mapping out a nomination timeline?
Well, Kobe, I guess I can kick it off. The most important thing is obviously to know when the nominations open and close. In my first stop at New York Tech, I shared this story with the group yesterday in our prep call, and I unfortunately missed my first ever opportunity to nominate. And I'm on the phone with Barb, and I was like, is there anything that can be done? And obviously, with the deadlines that are set, they're set for a reason. So now I write when that calendar of nomination open and close comes out. I write it in about 6 different spots on a paper. I have the calendar right next to my computer. I have it electronically. So really take notice of the calendar when it comes out and be in tune with the reminder emails that are sent at the open and close. So.
Yeah, I would echo what Emily said. I print out that calendar and follow it religiously every year. Sometimes especially if I know there'll be a nomination period in the middle of a crossover season, I'll set myself a Google Calendar reminder and an Outlook calendar reminder just so I don't forget, because we don't want to miss those opportunities to nominate our well-deserving student athletes.
I'll follow up what the others have said. The calendar is available on the CSC website. And I'm a big block off time on the calendar person, so I'll intentionally block off time at the start of each nomination period to do both the nominations and then the voting. Next week will be kind of a follow-up webinar to this on the voting piece of the equation.
And Kobe, one more thing before you jump off of this. If you are not the only person that works in your office on these nominations, set time or set a reminder email for a meeting with your other staff members that maybe take care of the nominations. So that way nothing is falling through the cracks.
Absolutely. Great note there, Emily. And then I'll toss this one to you first, Isaac. Obviously, mapping out is important, knowing when your submissions are due. How early in advance do you start putting together those nominations? What are your first steps you take, and kind of when is the right time to really start thinking about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. I usually pretty heavily rely on those emails that CSC sends out. And the first time I see one that mentions, hey, nominations are going to be opening up soon, immediately I'll start my cross-campus collaboration because it's a process. It's not something you can just jump into immediately, and I'm sure we'll cover more of that. But to finish answering the question that you asked, weeks ahead, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, because I know it's going to take that time to make sure that I have everything ready to go, especially like I mentioned before, in the middle of a crossover season. That's not something you want to be gathering at the last second.
I'll follow up. We're about a month out here at the College of Worcester from when we start planning. We do all of our planning by season. So even though football's not for another month, we already have everything wrapped up for football nominations. We send an email to everyone we plan to nominate. So we go through the grade report about mid-season, the stats to see who's on track to hit the participation minimums, and everyone who's in good standing at that point who we plan to nominate gets an email asking for a resume or a quick listing of what they're involved with. And we've had to follow up with them come nomination time if they get hurt or something. Hey, unfortunately, we can't nominate you because you didn't hit the participation minimum. And we're upfront with them. We put what it is right in the email. And our trick is we always ask for their resume to be sent a week ahead of when the first nomination period opens. So we're recording this November 11th for soccer. Our fall deadline was November 3rd for resumes, and that gives us a week to follow up with coaches to remind their athletes for the couple stragglers.
Is that your phone?
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of, you guys have already kind of touched on it a little bit, but on this topic of staying organized, staying on top, making sure you start your nominations early. What other tricks do you use to stay on top of your nominations?
So I could take this one. When we look at the academic awards calendar, not just CSC, but if you're nominating for academic awards for your conference or for coaches associations, we keep a running document here at Adelphi. So looking at each one of those columns or pieces of the nomination process, so that way we can start building it in based on the sports that we cover. So for example, I cover volleyball. I'll begin looking at the participation like my counterparts here said, and then we'll work with our campus partners to get their GPAs, and as the postseason awards for the conference come out, we fill it in. Anything that might be part of their resume or off the court, we're putting it all in this shared document so that way we can keep tabs on the GPAs as they get updated, right? If you're starting a basketball one, it might change once the fall grades come in. So kind of not having to double up on the work, but having all of this information that we might need for multiple different associations live in one spot can really kind of ease the burden when it comes down to getting that nomination in. Like, oh, I've already started this process for another association and another postseason award. Let me take a look at that doc to see if it has the information that I'm looking for.
Yeah, Emily makes a really great point. We do something similar here in Bakersfield, maybe under a slightly different, structure, but we have a running document that everybody can collaborate on that we call our year in review document. And it just makes things a lot easier to be able to go back and look and say, oh, I don't remember how many times so-and-so was the conference player of the week. But if you have a running document and keep it updated throughout the year, when you get to the end of the year or when you get to the middle of the year and you need to do a nomination such as one of these, you have all that information and just saves you a lot of time rather than having to go back and trying to comb through every single press release, every single broadcast note, whatever it may be, to find the information that you're looking for.
Absolutely. And kind of hitting another piece of planning, but also kind of moving into talking about collaboration and getting help for these nominations. I know yesterday in our planning meeting, we talked a little bit about how important it is to kind of know who has those GPAs and where you can track them down and getting kind of that information you may not have readily available. Just going around the panel, what are some advice you have for tracking down specific information, and how important is it to kind of know who your GPA person is and who your records keepers are?
I can go ahead and start here, Kobe. I mean, obviously, the GPA is the most important piece of the nomination, and a lot of us have different challenges over the years that we've overcome to get better access to that. I used to have to email a previous associate athletic director, and that would take some time to get to. But then I started overseeing our top 25 GPA boards. So, because I oversee those lists, I'm fortunate to have access to all the GPAs I need at all times for any award nomination. If you're at a bigger school, this will probably be your academic person. That if you're at a really big school, there will be a different one for each sport to set up an in-person meeting with to run through, hey, here's who we're thinking. Can you check grades? If you're at a smaller school, there's at least someone in the athletic department who is probably in charge of at least monitoring some academic progress that would have that for you. And if you're at a small school as well, it's a good opportunity to get your faculty athletics representatives involved because they're professors, so they'll have access to that information and love to get involved with helping the student athletes out.
I think when it comes to maybe needing to get a quicker response, it almost goes hand in hand with the education piece. So if you have a new person that works in academics that you need to get this information from, really telling the story, which is what we do every day, for a variety of different things, telling the story of why this is important and what it means to the student athletes or the department. We have a hallway upstairs next to our athletic suite that is just covered with academic All-American plaques. So sometimes we like to invite those people over to say, hey, this is what we're looking at when we ask you for this information. You're kind of helping be part of this accomplishment. So I think there's always an opportunity to educate, and this is an easy thing to do.
One thing that I would add on to that is echoing Kevin's thoughts about knowing who your academic person or knowing who the person has that information is. I'm fortunate here in Bakersfield that our academic person who oversees all that stuff is a former SID. And so it's just knowing that if I send him the information, say, hey, we're getting ready to nominate for Academic All District or Academic All America, and he says, okay, these are the criteria, right? That's a really fortunate position to be in, but it's not always that way. So having that advanced communication so that they understand clearly what you need and so that you get the correct information back is vitally important.
Yeah, and you've all already kind of touched on this point, but just to address it directly, talking about education and having people in your office that were ex-SIDs that are now academic people. But how do you build those relationships across campus to make your future nominations run a lot smoother?
One thing I'd say about that is it's really important to put yourself in a position to build those relationships, because a lot of times, especially in a time like right now where we're in a crossover season or just in general with our busy schedules, nights, weekends, travel, whatever it may look like, it's easy to kind of bunker yourself into your office or bunker yourself into the gym or at the field, and not really grow your network. A lot of times we hear about growing our network to externally, but your internal network is vitally important as well. So making the time to find out who those people are and to go visit them and to go see them, and not just when you need something from them, is a really important skill to learn. I know for myself here in Bakersfield, we have a pretty large campus in terms of overall square footage. Everything is very spread out. So even though our academics folks are part of the athletics department, they are all the way across campus. It's like an 8-minute walk to get to them, almost a half a mile. But it's important for me to make sure I get over there a couple times a month, once a week, just to check in on them. And so I'm not a stranger when I do show up.
I'll follow that up with Isaac made some really good points. Also, pay attention to who's on search committees within your department because sometimes search committees will bring in areas from outside of the athletics department to meet with candidates, especially for head coaching and above positions. And if you can start to figure out who those campus partners are sitting in on those interview sessions, you get a good idea of who your champions across campus are going to be.
Absolutely. And then staying on the topic of collaboration here, we talked about cross campus resources and figuring out where's the best spot to get your GPAs and staying on top of that. But another vital part of this is consulting your coaches. And obviously, sometimes coaches will have a lot of opinions, sometimes they'll have none. But in this process, well, in all of your opinions, when's the best time to maybe bring in the coaches consulting?
I think that goes hand in hand again with the education piece, letting them look at the criteria, read the criteria. Do you have any questions about the criteria? This is something that we'll kind of touch on at the beginning of the year. And then as we get closer to the nomination process, if we're having a hard time or if we're trying to narrow down or we need insight from them, like they've already had an opportunity to see what the nomination process looks like. And sometimes they're forgetful. So sometimes we go through this every semester or every season or every year. But that's okay because then it just allows them and even their assistant coaches too, right? If a lot of these assistants are on staff and maybe handling the academic piece for the program that they're working for, kind of giving them almost the insight as well to be part of this process is only going to better them down the line when they look to go on, if that's what they're looking to do.
For us, this process kind of varies by the contest. For the more sport specific ones like soccer and volleyball, we'll educate the coaches. All our coaches understand that this is the best athlete who also excels academically and with their extracurriculars. They've done a good job with that. So, someone like soccer, I might be in the office reviewing the criteria. I already have 4 of our 6 picked for the gender, and we've got 3 candidates, and it's pick 1 or pick 2. So, we already have the list dwindled down before we're going to the coach. But something for at large where we have limited spots per sport, and we'll get to tips for at large later on, we're more involving the coaches in the front end of picking their top candidates, especially for us women's lacrosse and field hockey in particular, because those sports tend to have a lot of overlap.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, Kevin. I feel the same here, that it depends on the sport for us. One particular example of that is, I don't know what it is about track and field, but for years it seemed like we would always miss someone. So and so was not eligible, or we thought they were not, but they actually were. And it wouldn't be until after the awards came out that the coach pointed it out to me. And that's an awkward conversation you don't really want to have, and you feel bad for not nominating a well-deserving student athlete. So for certain sports, maybe it's just, the difference in criteria, but I'd make sure to check in with some of my coaches about those, and others maybe not, but it just depends.
Yeah, and education seems to be definitely the word of the day, especially when it comes to handling the coaches and staying with the topic of keeping them, educated and making sure they're kind of seeing where you're coming from with these nominations. How can you help a coach kind of understand, or how do you have that conversation when they think that, athlete A is the best candidate, but maybe it's actually athlete B that has the better nomination when you look through the entire ballot? How do you go about having that conversation and kind of educating them on why one athlete's the better candidate versus the other?
Sure, I'll steal a line from our FARs. They have a massive spreadsheet they've compiled of recent NCAA postgraduate scholarships winners and what stands out on each nomination. Try, if you've had some recent winners, put down some facts of what happened for them. Were they an All-American? Were they Conference Player of the Year? And use that as a data point to bring with you when you meet with the coaches to go through what's getting us the winners.
That was going to be exactly my point, Kevin, to your comment. It's take a look at the people who won, and does your student athlete stack up against the ones that were selected and voted academic All-Americans? I think the data speaks for itself, and there's not much more to be said.
Yeah, I agree with you both. I would have said the exact same thing. And then one other thing I'd mention on top of that is something we've gone over before, but it's really important is the education piece, making sure your coaches understand what the award is and what it is not. I can't tell you how many times I've reached out to a coach and they said, well, so and so has the highest GPA. Well, yeah, but they're not even eligible because they only started 50% of the games. So leading with that and making sure it's as clear as possible what the criteria helps narrow down to exactly what you're looking for quickly.
So we've covered the planning process, when to start making your nomination, how to get ready for it. We've talked about our collaboration, but now to get into what truly makes a strong nomination. And as we kind of change here and pivot to this new topic, just a reminder to everyone viewing: if you have any questions, use the Q&A feature on Zoom, and we can answer your questions in real time. But looking at what makes a truly great nomination in each of your experiences, what truly stands out to reviewers when they're looking at these nominations?
Well,
Sorry, Kevin. So I think for me, right at the start is those major awards, right? If you have a major award and you have a 3.9 and you've started all 100% of the contest that you've played in, I think that for me right there is like, okay, this person moves to the top of my list, right? When we get those big spreadsheets, and yes, sometimes there are a lot of names, I'm sifting through each one of those and saying, okay, like did you have a major postseason award for your conference? Did you break a national record? Right? I think there's so many things that we as individuals could each pinpoint that's important to us. But those kind of two, I guess for me, right at the start, are ones that really stand out for me.
just to follow that up, the major award should be the very first thing. I see way too many nominations that are a prior All American or academic All American, and that's tucked all the way at the end. If you have a prior academic All American or All American, that should be the very first thing in that box for career honors or season honors, followed by Good Works Team. I know NACDA's expanded the Good Works Team to be an all sports award now and not just a football specific one, and know what to abbreviate and shorthand on your nominations and not. We all obviously know AAA can stand for Academic All-American, but that's a big enough award that that's where you spend your characters on the nomination, making sure that that's spelled out, because that'll catch your eye a lot quicker than having AAA buried in the middle of a spreadsheet.
Yeah, absolutely. To take the analogy of the newspaper industry, whatever is above the fold is going to be seen first. And when the reviewers and voters eventually are going to be seeing hundreds possibly of nominees, you really have to put your best foot forward first. Otherwise, your student athlete runs the risk of just kind of fading into the background very quickly.
Yeah, and so you put the best achievements at the top, make sure those are the kind of the eye catching on the ballot. How do you, as you go through your ballot and get towards the end of your nomination, how do you stay concise? What are the details that you kind of end up cutting out in each of your experiences? Where do you kind of make your cuts? What are some of those like fringe stats that might be your first cuts as you put together these nominations?
For fringe stats, to me, from the athletic standpoint, are points against X opponent, Y opponent. It's better to quantify that you had 3 20-point games instead of saying 21 points versus institution A, 22 versus institution B. And then the purpose of the resumes for us is to try to find something that's going to differentiate a nominee. Your SAC trick or treat, your SAC toy drive, your Tim Tebow Night to Shine proms are all very important initiatives that our students do, but just about every institution's athletic department has students who do those things and others similar. So you need to find stuff for the nomination that'll stand out, that's out of the ordinary. And to us, stuff like that'll be the stuff we cut.
Yeah, that's a great point. I feel like when you get to sports that have times and it's like they ran this and it was their third best and they're just a junior, and it's like, okay, well, did they place first in the conference? Like that versus this is what the time was and this is how many times they've ran a good time. It's like, no, where did they stack up against your conference, your region, nationally? Was it a program record, a region record, a course record, right? Kind of like Kevin said, finding what the edge is in each one of those and kind of cutting away that the extra, the fringe, the stuff that is going to take someone too long to read through, unfortunately.
Yeah, both of you make great points, and I think to summarize the major concept here is that you can't treat every nomination the same, right? You can't nominate a basketball player the same you would nominate a swimmer. You can't nominate a football player the same you would nominate a soccer player. They're just different. You have to treat it simply different. But the most important thing is to contextualize, like Emily was saying, what makes you stand out in your conference, your region, nationally, and put that as high as possible in your nomination packet.
Absolutely, and sometimes it really does feel like those details can kind of be the make or break thing with nominations, especially when it's super competitive every year. Speaking of kind of standing out, do any of you have any examples of specifically compelling ways someone highlighted an academic or service achievement?
Sure, I can go ahead because that's one of the things we look for. So Isaac and I are both national coordinators, so we oversee some review teams for some of the contests within the program. Putting stuff that matters. Do they put the academic stuff? Do they put the community service stuff? If you've got a fringe nomination and those two boxes are blank, that's getting trimmed when it comes to the trimming. So making sure there's actual substance there, and again, not just your standard every student does it type things.
And obviously, quality is a big portion of this, but there is also always a question of quantity. How many people are you putting forward? How many should you nominate? When do you nominate the max? If each of you just kind of wants to touch on those questions, how many are you nominating? Do you always just nominate the max? Do you kind of be a little more strategic with it? What are your strategies there?
I think to a point that we made earlier, it's sometimes you have to even trim within the nominations. If someone was third team all conference and you had two major award winners and then some in between, it's like, okay, well, maybe unfortunately, if that person doesn't have a GPA that kind of stands out from the rest, they're all maybe pretty even in that regard. And there's not really a need to kind of build into then having to put it on the voters to kind of sift through that, right? If there's opportunity to really just take a look at maybe winners that have won in the past again, and like Isaac said, it's all going to be different sport by sport. Look at just internally within your department, people who have won. What have their accomplishments been, and does it really make sense? Right? They may be a great person on campus. And again, we hope that all of our student athletes are. But when it comes down to boiling down a really great nomination, it's like, okay, are you ticking all of these boxes that previous award winners have kind of had to get the recognition?
Yeah, it was interesting for me as I was preparing. I'm a little bit jittery right now because we're 28 minutes past the nomination open portal and I haven't submitted anything yet. So my type A is showing. But as I was preparing our soccer nominations for I do both the men's and the women's side, I had a grand total of one student athlete who was eligible on the men's side. So that made my choices really easy. Compare that to the women's side, I had to, as we talked about before, I had to reach out to my coach and I said, okay, here's the top three. These three got to get in for sure. But then I've got another five that we have to whittle down to three. Can you help me? And she was able to share some insight, a little bit more about, their academic endeavors that I didn't quite have all the details about, or as well as just to bring up some things about the fact that one of them was a SAC representative, so that maybe that sets her a little bit apart of a counterpart who was otherwise equal. But at the end of the day, your job is to pick for soccer anyhow, the six best that you can. But don't be afraid to not put six if they really aren't deserving. If you've got a baseball player who has the 3.6 GPA, but hit 200 on the year you don't have to nominate them because at the end of the day, yeah, everybody nominated will get academic all district, and if they're worthy, they're worthy. But there is a greater contest going on here, which is academic all American, and those are really really high standards. There's a reason why the academic all America program is one of the most stringent awards, one of the most high honors that a student athlete can get nationally.
We're of the camp here at Worcester where we nominate the max wherever possible because it's a chance to celebrate our student athletes and showcase what they do on and off the field. Prior to it switching where everyone was academic all district, we were a little more picky on who we nominated and moved forward, but now that everyone gets academic all district, we're the max every chance we can. Remember, you don't have to necessarily put someone on the national ballot who you designate as a nominee. There's a nice little toggle, yes or no, should this person be considered for the national ballot, which makes that part easy. We only put about 20% of our nominees forward for consideration for the national ballot. Remember, this is our organization, our chance to celebrate our student athletes. A coaching association's not going to never not nominate from a coaching standpoint. And the bigger and better this program becomes, it helps the CSE staff with potential sponsorships because it's been a few years since this prestigious program has had a big title sponsor.
Yeah, and I actually want to kind of go right off something you just mentioned, Kevin, talking about the national ballot. Obviously, selecting who do you put forth onto, the all district ballot, but how do you make that decision of who then you do toggle yes for on who you're pushing forward to the national ballot?
Sure. So it depends on the sport, honestly. Some sports are more picky than others, like obviously track and field, for example, at the Division III level. I believe it's been this way at Division I and II for a while. They doubled the number of All-Americans recently at the national championships, where places 9 through 16 are now All-Americans. So we're now doubling the All-Americans at each championship. So that one gets a little more tight as to when to nominate. So for that was one of my contests. We kind of drew the line for trimming last year that you had to be an All-American, a conference champion, or top 3 in cross country just because of how many All-Americans there were to have a manageable ballot. Obviously, basketball, I'm not picking on basketball by any means. We tend to have less nominees, but traditionally, the overall GPA basketball versus track and field tends to be a little more wide range of GPAs for candidates. So that one, maybe just a first team or second team all conference gets put through. Kind of pay attention as you vote if you're newer to the profession and see what the type of nominees are as well. You're not going to see many 5 ERAs or 3 points, 2 rebounds on the national ballot. So those are ones to not toggle forward. But as you get experience in the profession with voting and seeing what's making the national ballot can help make you make better informed decisions with who to move forward.
And kind of staying on the topic just a little bit longer of, choosing who to put through and making these selections. You'd kind of hit on it earlier, Kevin, and I'd love to hear all of your thoughts on that large spots. Obviously, sometimes you have a plethora of sports for a very limited amount of at-large spots. What's just that whole process like? How do you have a voice for your sport if you have an SID who's also has an at-large sport and has X amount of kids? How do you have those conversations with other coaches and other coworkers when you have a whole group of sports to kind of narrow down into only a few spots?
Yeah, let me go first on this one, and then I'll hand it over to the experts, because I am in a weird situation with this where for the men's at-large program, the only sport that we sponsor is wrestling. So at the end of the day, it's really like a single sport program for me. And then even on the women's side, I think we only have beach volleyball and golf. So it's really not that hard overall, but it does take some cross-office collaboration. I am the beach volleyball contact, and we have another contact who's our golf contact. And so he and I will get in a room and we kind of, spar it out for those limited number of spots. But overall, it comes down to collaboration, which I'm sure these two can speak to a little bit better.
Yeah, so I think the good thing about the at-large is obviously that it takes place at the end of the school year, which can also be the challenge because this spring for us, I know, is super crazy and hectic. And obviously, we've forgotten what happened in November to the fall sports. But like everything that we've talked about, the planning, the tracking, the keeping an eye on maybe people who have won academic all conference, if you have a conference award like that, they were a major award winner. So for us here at Adelphi, we have field hockey, bowling, golf, and women's lacrosse. And our lacrosse program is nationally touted in Division II. So it sometimes gets a little crazy as far as, okay, well, I have 4 women's lacrosse players that were all Americans, and 3 of them were first team all conference, and 1 was a major award winner. But my golfer, she maybe won an individual title, or she was top 5, right? So we sit in a room, we make a list, and my staff and I, and sometimes we drag our compliance director in since she manages the grades for us, and we kind of take a look and we lay it all out. And that's kind of what that tracking document is really helpful to kind of, okay, put it into perspective, each one of the things that someone might be accomplishing throughout the year. And then, like Kevin said, taking a look at that resume, what sets you apart? Are you doing something? We have a women's soccer player, which I know is not at large, so I apologize, but she created a law review club on campus. And it's like, whoa, super not connected to your sport, but something that you're doing, and you have a great GPA. So, having that group discussion is something that we're always doing in the month of May, which is a crazy time, but we do make time for it because it's important to get the at-large right.
We approach it a little differently, but obviously, if you're at a big school with a big staff, you're going to want to get everyone together in a room who has an at-large sport to figure out what your plan of attack is going to be. While some of our at-large sports are more relevant from a competitive excellence standpoint than maybe a few of the others, we treat each sport the same, so we divide our spots equally. So on the men's side, that's 3 men's golfers, 3 men's lacrosse players. So we'll get like 4 from each coach. That's one we're more meeting with the coach for just because of the nuances of the at large. So we always have an extra person in our back pocket on the lacrosse and golf side just in case they don't have their 3 that hit the minimums or are a scorer at the conference championship on the golf side. And then on the women's side, we have women's golf, field hockey, women's lacrosse. So each of them are guaranteed 2. So I have our women's lacrosse coach and field hockey coach work together, again, because of that overlap between the 2 sports, and they have 4 sports. So I'll give them a list of who their top 4 candidates are from each sport and tell them to pick a combined 4 nominees. And if someone claims the dual sport, then that's one of their spots. And again, we'll have that backup for each sport in case somebody doesn't hit the participation minimums when the time comes to do the actual nominating.
It is crazy hearing all of you talk about just how much goes into these and how attention to detail matters and all of that. We've talked a lot about what makes a really strong nomination and how to organize that, but also I think it's important to spend some time talking about what to stay away from and some of the common pitfalls that you may see when making these nominations. What are some common mistakes that you've all seen made in the past on these nomination forms?
Sure. Take your time filling them out and make sure you have everything selected correctly. Last year, there was a spot on the field while your institution name automatically pulls in from your CSC member profile. There's a spot to customize how you want your institution name to appear. Like mine would be the College of Worcester from my profile, but maybe we just want Worcester on the award and in the release. We see way too many nominations that have the student athlete's name there where it's asking for the institution name. And then making sure you have the correct gender selected is important because you can accidentally bump that if you're rushing through the nominations. And of course, double check before you hit submit that the student athlete's name is spelled correctly. But that institution as it should appear on the award thing, if all the nominators could be diligent about cleaning that up, that would save a lot of editing on the back end of the process. So remember, there's almost 200 CSC members behind the scenes to pull this whole program together throughout the year.
Yeah, that's a really great point, Kevin. With the both of us being national coordinators, we've both seen that time and time again. And I think the real root cause of what often it causes those issues when you're rushing through is the common pitfall of just waiting too long to get your act together, right? So the more you can get ready, the more you can be prepared, the more you can work ahead to be ready to go when the nomination portal opens, the more time you can take with the nomination and make sure that you're doing a really good job. And then that will then not only increase, just the overall quality of the dotting the I's and the crossing the T's, but it'll increase the quality of your nomination. It'll give you more time to gather more information. We've all written a story before that had to be rushed, compared to a story where we had time to do the research. We had time to sit down and get extra voices as part of interviews. And the more you can do to include into your nomination packet, like Emily was talking about, finding about those clubs, finding about those extracurriculars, the better that you can make your nomination. And that's not going to happen if you're realizing, oh, nomination portal closes in 3 hours.
Absolutely. Never want to have to rush those nominations. More time, the better, always on those. And I know in our planning meeting yesterday, Kevin, you talked a little bit about it, and we've all hit on it today, just the importance of making sure everything's in the right spot. But how important truly is that? And does it kind of bolster your nomination when you're able to have everything in the correct spot and make it a super easy to read nomination?
It certainly does. I'll go back to my point earlier. Know what to abbreviate and shorthand and what not to. The big ticket awards, make sure you spell those out, all region or above. You can certainly use ABCA for the American Baseball Coaches Association, like the acronym for the association doesn't need to be spelled out, but make sure you're spelling out like All America, Good Works team on nominations. And then for the at-large sports, when you don't have stat boxes, if you're talking about your lacrosse player, 17 GP is perfectly fine for 17 games played. And then you continue 41G, 15A, that'd be what, 66P for points, 90 GB, 27 DC for draw controls. Anything below all region can certainly be shorthanded, and that allows you to a little bit more wiggle room to get stuff in on the nominations.
And we've also talked about, and you kind of hit it, Isaac, like nominating very late in the process, or also kind of managing multiple nominations all at once and organizing those. What are some tips that you all have just to stay caught up on your nominations as you have to kind of maneuver multiple nominations?
Yeah, so if you're fortunate to have a couple of staff members or at least one more staff member in your office, I've gotten to the point where I've streamlined a little bit of the actual nomination piece. I've delegated that out. That doesn't mean I am still meeting and helping select and choose the people that are going to be put up, whether it be for our academic all conference, and then obviously CSC. So if there's an opportunity to streamline and make sure that that person has what they need to get the nominations done, that can be a helpful way to kind of not mismanage or oh, I'm going to nominate 2 people and you nominate 2 people, right? Kind of maybe keeping all of the sports. If you cover that sport, those are the nominations you're taking care of. So really, obviously, if you're in a position and fortunate to have staff around you, kind of enlisting their help it can be a way to not miss deadlines and to manage multiple nominations.
I'll just echo the big tip is have the same person do every nomination for that particular sport. Like Emily said, maybe even the at-large, having a point person do all of your at-larges, even if different people cover the teams, just to make sure they all get done. And while we've said there's a lot of prep work, at the end of the day, it doesn't take super long to get the actual nominations in once you have everything together, especially now if you're not putting a lot of your nominees on the national ballot. For us, it takes about 5 minutes to do a nominee when we're putting someone on the national ballot, just because we have all of our pre-work done. We already have the resume together. We already know if they're going to be all conference or not. They moved the timeline back, so most of your major awards are already announced come nomination time. So it's as simple as pulling up the awards release, pulling a couple things from that. So it's a very organized process, and it only takes I'd say less than 2 minutes to do a nominee if you're not putting them forward on the national ballot.
Yeah, and you've all mentioned, the importance of organization and, the templates and the sheets and the all of that you all kind of use. Are there any other kind of tools or tips or tricks you all swear by when it comes to creating a nomination, reviewing it for accuracy, that you would recommend to people out there that may be looking for something to help uh, make their nominations easier?
Sure. Learn who the winners are in your division if you're from a school that doesn't necessarily get a lot of winners. I mean, CSC, I believe they still have this on the new Academic All America website. They have like the list broken down by division of who has the most all time winners. Or honestly, just look through one year who had multiple winners, and then the next year when you go to vote, or maybe the next time there's a contest, pay a little bit more attention to that school's nominees to see what they're putting in their nominations that can help you out in the future.
Absolutely. And as we kind of, start to come to a close here, looking at just everything that goes into making a good nomination, what are some things you wish you would have known before submitting your first nomination?
One thing for me is, I guess this was a little bit later on because the process changed, but when the process changed to have the option to push someone onto the national ballot or not, I wish I would have known to know when and when not to, because like Kevin said, it's relatively fast as long as you're on top of it, but it does take a lot of extra work, because there's a lot more questions, there's a lot more detail that you have to put onto the national ballot. And so, again, going back to the idea of studying who wins and what is sort of a minimum benchmark for being a legitimately a legitimate contender on the national ballot, you can end up saving yourself a lot of time and effort by saying, you know what, this kid is going to be just fine sticking in the academic all district section.
Yeah, to Isaac's point, just being a little realistic, right? Again, they might be a great kid, right? We hope all of our student athletes are great kids, but that doesn't mean that they're academic all-American worthy. One thing I wish I knew was the tightness of the deadline, right? So I said at the top of this webinar that I unfortunately missed an opportunity to nominate because I was unaware or I was too busy. I was a one-person show. So really kind of having the dates and being mindful of the reminder emails that come through can really obviously give you the opportunity to celebrate such a great accomplishment.
Yeah, and we've all talked on how important it is to make sure that you get to show off your athletes, and this whole process is you get to honor those athletes that really stand out and achieve these great things. How do you ensure that those student athletes' voice or personalities come through in these nominations?
I think the greatest thing that comes through when I speak to student athletes or I see student athletes after these announcements come out, it's like, wow, that's so cool. How did they get to be part of that? Or how did they get that recognition, right? And if it's a freshman or a sophomore, it's like, hey, this is what you can work towards. This is something that you can be a part of too. And kind of giving that education piece, not only to our coaches and our across campus partners, but just to our student athletes. Sometimes they see awards come through in a flurry and it's like, well, what does this one even mean? So our significance of having all of the plaques in the hallway is to kind of make people aware that this award exists and that it's a really great honor. And here are the things that you should be doing all the time. You should be getting good grades. You should be competing fiercely, but this is how you can kind of get it done. And I think that's something that I've enjoyed throughout this process of being in this industry and being able to be part of nominating for this honor.
I'll follow that up with, we actually do a lot of our work on this topic at the beginning of the school year. Obviously, the resumes are important to us. Matt, my assistant, or I, we meet with all student athletes as part of our beginning of the year administrative meeting with all the key parts of the athletic department. And we spend a good time emphasizing the importance of awards and how they're partners with us, that we need their help to put them in the best possible position to be selected for these awards. So when we send them a request, we tell them there's the importance, and we showcase a couple examples sometimes of people, if we're working with a particular sport, of what they've done, like a football player winning post-grad scholarship. We highlight a couple things that he maybe did during his career and educate the students that these are the types of things that win these awards. So hopefully they'll take the initiative to go out and seek similar opportunities to best position themselves.
Yeah, it's a really great point, Kevin. And the thing I'd add on top of that is that it can be a two-way street. You have to build those relationships with the student athletes, because I tell our student athletes at the beginning of the year, it's my job to tell your story, but it's your story, and I need to tell it the way you want it to be told. So getting yourself to build those relationships with the student athletes can be difficult, especially when there's 200, 300, 400, maybe more student athletes running around your campus. But going the extra effort, the extra mile to get to know them, to make yourself approachable to them, can make a really big difference. In sometimes you'd be really surprised the things they'll tell you that you knew nothing about, and you're like, wow, that's a great story. I can tell that if you want. And then they'd be like, yeah, sure. I didn't think it was a big deal. No, it is a big deal, but you wouldn't have known it if you hadn't taken the time to talk to them after practice, or to sit on, talk to them as they're getting on the bus.
Absolutely. It has been an honor to get to talk to all of you today about all of this. So many great things brought up, and so many great tips. I feel like I'm ready to make an incredible nomination now. To cap off the day, the last question I'd pose to all of you is just, what's the best piece of advice you'd offer for someone who's new to the process and watching this webinar?
Don't be intimidated. Like Kevin said and Isaac said, it once you have all of the pieces together, it should not be a long nomination to put through, but you can't get all the pieces together in a very short amount of time. So be cognizant of that, and just really try your best on getting all of the information that you think might be part of a worthy nomination.
So I'll follow up Emily's point. Great point, Emily. I'll add to that. Obviously, the calendar is super important in getting everything together ahead of time. If you're new to the process, I'll put out a shameless plug to consider joining the committee. It's a great experience for professional development. It takes almost 200 CSC members to pull off the Academic All-America program each year. Look up Katie Gonzalez at Illinois Wesleyan or Bo White at the CSC National Staff, and they'll get you pointed in the right direction. Time commitments, a couple hours twice a year, because you'll usually run 2 contests, one in the fall or winter, and then your second contest you'll help work with is in the spring.
Yes, I love the shameless plug, Kevin. We always need extra help on the review team. Many hands make light work. So if you're interested, please do, like Kevin said, reach out to either Katie or Bo. And I would, my advice, I would echo what Emily said about organization makes things so much easier. And then on top of that, I would say, I guess not necessarily advice, but another shameless plea is to ask people to participate in the voting. Because newer SIDs may not know this, but the national ballot is open to all CSC members, and we have an unfortunately low turnout rate. I mean, politics and ballots and polls, it is what it is. That's just how our society is. But this is a really high honor for our student athletes to achieve. And the more eyes and attention we can get on it across the nation, the better. And that starts with us being proud of the work that we do as college sports communicators. So I would encourage everybody this year to do your best to try to vote on as many national ballots as you can.
Absolutely. Well, I want to give one last big thank you to Isaac, Emily, and Kevin for sharing their advice with us today. It was great to hear you guys talk about just the importance of the nomination. It was sweet to see how important it is to all of you to, get these athlete stories out there and hear all the tips about, organization and education, and just how important it is to make sure, you're organized. You're making sure people know why this award is important, and then also using that education to kind of create the best ballot possible. So thank you all again for that. We encourage you all to visit collegesportscommunicators.com for updates on future webinars and membership news. And thanks again for being with us today.